All right, in this lesson, I'm going to be taking a AutoCAD file, a chair, and I'm going to be making a rendering out of it. So I've opened up 3dsMax and I want to go to Import. And I already have this set up, so I'm going to open up my AutoCAD DWG file and say Open. And one thing you should notice when you open up 3dsMax is that it gives you option for layers. And sometimes this is nice. If you update files, you can delete the layers you don't need. But I'm just going to go ahead and just it's going to default to all. And then the thing I need to change though is on the geometry, really important I change this. It defaults, I think, at 1. I change this to 0.01, and what that does is it prevents any of the bit mapping or the splines higher resolution. And then I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Now you'll see 4 views of a chair. Think of this as a studio setting, but in a completely black room. There are no lights, there are no materials, there's nothing here. So first thing I need to do is create a setting for this. Now, whatever view I want to work on, I click on it, and if I want to work on it, for example, the top view, I'll go ahead and select the top view, and on the bottom right, I'll select minimize or the viewport, so maximize this one. I'll maximize that. And then I simply going to scroll out with my mouse. And what I want to do is put a floor on here. Now I've built this from 0, 0, so it goes up. So I'm going to go ahead to the standard primitives and select plane. And I'm going to drag it and move it around the object. And I'm basically centering it to it. Now, you want to confirm that on your other views here, and you see actually the line below it. So we're in good shape. Unfortunately, there are no textures or anything on here, so it's essentially just there's absolutely no material on here, and I'm going to add materials to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the material editor on the ribbon bar above, go ahead and select it. Now it defaults to really nothing here, but what I want to do is go to modes, and I want to say there is Slate Material Editor, but I want to go to Compact Material Editor. And what this is, it comes with some preset materials. Now they're unfortunately not enough to really work from, but for example, if you click on them, they'll tell you glossy plastic, and there's some aluminum and different metals. The thing with the polished aluminum is highly reflective, so in a very dark environment, you're not going to see much. But let's go ahead and just say wall paint or whatever. But notice that when I put it on to we want to select the material. This one's going to be, so I'll select the legs there, right? And then I'll just grab this wall paint or whatever it is. It's plastic. I can change the color if I want to here. So for example, I can change it to this and say, okay. Now let's go ahead and bring in some of our own. And so the nice thing is it does have its own textures in here, but let's go ahead and bring in our own. And the way that we do this, it's kind of fun because you can go on and do an internet search. So I've gone ahead already, and I just randomly typed in wood, or actually this is just flooring, and I came across stone tiling is what I selected here. Now the thing is, you don't want something in 3-dimensional. It has to be a 2-dimensional object, right? So there are a lot you can work with here. So let's go ahead and do any one of these is fine. I've already selected this, so there it is. Now, generally, you want to click on and get a higher resolution. You have to be careful because, believe it or not, this is a cottage industry. People sell these kind of textures, and so you'll download something and you'll notice that it's has their company in there. But I'm going to go ahead and save image, and I've already designated a place for it. So here it is, Tuscany tile. There it is. I'll replace the additional one. Now, there's a little trick to this that I've found over the years. If I do it again, right click and say save image as, there it is. I can go ahead and simply drag it over here. Now I'm going to just drag it onto a place where there's no material on here. So it's just blank. So let's go ahead and just drag this onto here. And so there it is. Now, if it doesn't encompass the sphere, then you've not done it correctly. And so then what we'll do is we'll come back here, and I'm simply going to drag it and drop it onto the surface that I need. Now, you see, though, that it's really too big, right? So if you click on it, it's just too big. If you're just real careful here in the basic parameters, this M, if you click on it, material, click the M, you can actually then the tiling. And so if you ever play video games, you'll notice things kind of repeat. So you have to be careful here, but this is going to repeat. That's why we selected this object, because it's going to work for that in that capacity here. So you just have to, it all depends on the resolution of your image that you're bringing in. So let's type in 3, let's see what happens. I want to make this a little bigger. So let's type in, so it repeats more. Let's type in like 6. And it really depends on the image that you bring in there, right? So let's just say this is fine. All right. So other thing is there is nothing on this seat. So I've already gone in and I typed in a material for the wood plane here. So you can do that. Just a generic wood grain. Again, you kind of have to be careful because they will repeat over to like when you put them on there. And the other thing is I haven't really on this one differentiated between the back of the chair and the seat. So it's just going to come in on one thing, but let's just drag and see what it looks like. You can change a lot of this in terms of the rotation angle, the highlights. Now, the only problem is I don't have any lights set up, so it's still very dark. It's actually going to render dark. So what I need to do is add some lights here. So what I'll do then is if you notice over here, there's a light bulb. You kind of have to be careful because you can kind of blast this, but I'm going to go ahead and select on the light standard. All right. And so it's actually helpful to do this in the different views. I'm going to zoom out of here. This is my front view, and I'm going to put an Omni Light. Omni Light is a general light. Now, I don't really want the shadow on here. You can, and this is really your discretion, but I'll go ahead and put it above it. And if you put it too close, you'll kind of blow it out. So there it is. And then I'll go ahead and do a target spotlight. Now, again, if you're too close to it, you really, you can kind of blast it. So I'll go like this. And then if you find that, you render it and it's too bright, there are a lot of settings in here you can do for your intensity on all these things. So like, for example, here's here's the Omni Light. Now you're saying, oh, how do I change it? Actually, if you go up top, there's modify, right? So if you don't change it the first time, you can go back and I can select the Omni Light and I could say the intensity. Let's say I want it a little bit shaded. Yellow is probably a little much, but if you can change the kind of the light that you're seeing here, and you can play around with all these things. But more than likely what I want to do is maybe the intensity might be too much. So you could like 0.5, or you might want to add the intensity or actually add more lights, and you can do that. All right. So something you want to play around with. Let's go ahead back to our 3/4 view. And let's go ahead and render this. But what you can do is you have got this orbit. You can kind of move this around in a view that you like. But what we want to do, this is kind of the international, this teacup. If you ever look at Pixar, this is what they used to use. So you go to render setup. And so a couple things. Sometimes I notice that these renderers, it's like a plugin. There's a V-Ray and there's a lot of stuff. So you have to be kind of careful because sometimes you'll render it and there's nothing there and it's looking for the plugin. So I'm just going to go to this Quicksilver hardware. Now it's going to maybe be different on yours depending on your video card and such. So if it's coming out black, you might want to look at the renderer here. All right. So single, we're just doing a frame. You notice 640 by 480. These are kind of low resolutions, actually. You might want to bump that up. But most important, you want to scroll down and go to the render output. And I'm going to go files. And in this case, I just want to do a JPEG. So I'll do find JPEG. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste in that link that I had. And then I'll go ahead and I have a rendering thing set up. There's a JPEG. So I'll just default over it and I'll say save. Now it's going to ask me, are you sure? Yes, I want to render over it. Okay, so okay. And so all I need to do now is just simply hit render and see what happens. You'll never get it right the first time. All right, so you're going to render it. And so I've done this a couple times, so I feel pretty comfortable. I have the shading the way I want to. It's kind of obviously, if you ever watch an animated movie, there are people who this is all they do. I mean, for example, all they'll do is put textures, or all they'll do is put lighting, or all they'll do is put the setting. And so you kind of have to be careful that this doesn't turn into something that takes too much time. And so what we'll do, though, is once we have this set up, we can import all our objects. So you only have to do this once. which saves you a lot of time. So then you would just turn off the chair, and then you would bring in different items here, right? So you'll notice that over here on my model, so this is a separate thing, but you'll notice then that I've got all these layers and you can turn them off, things you don't need. So the legs and the chair and the whatever, however you labeled all these things, right? And so then if you bring in another, for example, a table, you would just turn that on and off, or you could start from scratch, whatever you want. All right, so what we've done is we've created a rendering in a JPEG. Now, the other thing I want to say is make sure that when you save these textures, you bring them in here, you want to keep the texture somewhere, because what happens is a lot of people will just drag and drop them in, and then they don't save the textures. And then 3ds Max, it doesn't embed them, and so it's looking for them. So I've gone ahead and saved them. Generally, you want to save it next to the 3ds Max file. They're not it doesn't really know. It's not going to search the internet for your files, and I labeled them anyway. So make sure that you save them, because next time you open it up, it's going to look for them. And if you don't want to have it ask you where they are, you can just put it right next to the 3ds Max file. All right. So that is the end of the first image. And then go ahead and obviously we want to go ahead and look at that image and just inspect it and such. So there it is for me. So here's my rendering, and voila, I've created a rendering, and that is what I would upload for my grade. Okay, so you have completed the chair rendering exercise in 3ds Max.